So it is April 26th at 7:32 p.m. This is the Legislation and Administration Committee of the RTM in Fairfield. And we have two agenda items. The first one is the establishment of the Fair Rent Commission. I would like to turn it over to Karen, I think. Are you going to lead us on this one? Feel free
Sure.
to
Can I just ask about roll call? I just wrote down everybody's name in the bar. Is that good enough, or do you want me to do the roll call?
That works for me.
That work for everybody?
Yep.
Karen, do you want to walk us through like the background, and then actually, if you want to share a screen and show us the document, that's fine, or not, whatever works for you. But that's why, especially for the second item, that's why I wanted to do this on WebEx, so we can share a screen when we need to.
Yes, and I forgot to pull up the final version of this, so I may not be able to share a screen. But let me start with the background. So there is a there's already been a Fair Rent Commission statute on the books for a long time, and several towns in Connecticut have that already. But what happened a year or so ago was the legislature now requires any town with a population of at least 25,000 to have a Fair Rent Commission. So we didn't have one before, so that's what this this ordinance is for. And with almost no exception, we really are tracking the statute. There was a model ordinance that was created by, I think it was CCM. And we used that as a starting point and pretty much adopted that. The one thing that we added that I don't think is in the statute is that we think a landlord and a tenant should be members of the commission. And otherwise, I don't think there's much that we added that was different. We had help from Mark Barnhart, which was awesome because Mark's been to, and that's why I've asked him to be on this, or we've asked him, because he's been on some programs about this, and frankly, probably his department will be administering this, backing up the commission. So, Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything about the general, what's happening or the logistics of it.
I was going to say, lucky us. Yeah, that's exactly right. There was, for many years, enabling legislation at the state level that allowed communities, provide an option for communities to establish fair rent commissions, and a number did. Fairfield did not. But this past legislative session, there was a new state statute enacted that requires communities over 25,000 to establish fair rent commissions. So once that took effect, I started to read up on the subject matter. I did attend a workshop that was sponsored, I think, through CCM, but the toolkit you mentioned was put together by Home Connecticut.
Right.
And the model ordinance does roughly track, the ordinance that you're proposing does roughly track the model ordinance language for the most part. Looking at communities at roughly our size, membership varies from a low of 3 to up to 9. I think you're proposing 5 with some alternates.
Mm-hmm.
And most do provide for both landlord and tenant representation on the commission.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, it's pretty much a mixed bag in terms of the departments that provide staff support or serve as ex officio members of the commission. West Hartford, which I did talk to the folks there, their Department of Social Services provides staff support and serves as ex officio members. But in other towns, it's my department, Economic Development. Some communities have the Housing Authority or Planning and Zoning, or the Health Department. And my department, and also Social Services, doesn't typically have a regulatory role.
Mm-hmm.
The Health Department does enforce housing code issues. Obviously, Planning and Zoning has some land use land use responsibilities. So I do think I did talk to Sands Cleary. We're not the most ecstatic about adding to our already heavy workload, but we know that this is something that has to get done. So we're prepared to work with the commission once it's enacted. The other thing that I would note is in talking to West Hartford and some other communities, this is a fairly, the activity levels vary. Some commissions are rarely meet at all, and others are quite active. West Hartford does tend to be relatively active. They had 8 meetings this past year, a number of complaints that they were dealing with. And these are quasi, judicial proceedings. So they have the town attorney's office in West Hartford provides a lot of legal support to the commission to ensure that they're following appropriate procedures, administering oaths, taking testimony, just the normal activity level with the commission. And obviously there's a cost associated, not just in providing legal support, but the other ensuring that you have a proper transcript or record of these meetings. So I think they had estimated their budget roughly a $25,000 budget for this, but that's something we'll have to track closely once something is established.
And that's something we talked about briefly at the budget hearing, because I know we've talked about this offline, that you don't know yet what this will cost or what you'll need to carry on these things. So maybe I did find the version. I can walk everyone through this briefly. So the first section just creates the Fair Rent Commission, and the idea is basically if a tenant feels that the hike in rent was way beyond the market level or too high, or there's health violations or building code violations, or there's a series of reasons they can bring a complaint, which we'll get to. They can file a complaint with the commission, and that's what this is for. So the commission, as Mark said, it's 5 members and 2 alternates, 1 landlord and 1 tenant, and then 3 members who are neither tenant nor landlord.
Karen, can I ask you a question? Do you want us to wait to the end to ask questions? Do you want to run through the whole thing, or do you want to go paragraph by paragraph?
It doesn't matter to me. We could go maybe paragraph by paragraph.
Yeah, I think that's one of the values of doing this on screen is we can talk as we go.
Yep.
And just to FYI, I can't see everybody right now. So if it doesn't seem like I'm calling on you, that's why. So speak up. But I think Drew is first in line.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's
You
fine.
wanna
I just
use
didn't
the
know what,
hand up, or you
I just
wanna
didn't know what.
raise the hand.
Mm.
How do you want to do it, Josh?
Go ahead and raise your hand, but I'm not sure that I'll see everybody. So if I don't call on you, just call,
Okay.
say so. Yeah.
So, my question was about the 5-person, 2 alternate. I see that there is a landlord and a tenant. My understanding of other commissions, they have a certain number of Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated
We didn't get to that
voters.
yet. That's coming up.
That will be in the future?
We'll see that coming up, Drew.
It's
Okay,
right here
thanks,
in
Laura.
this section, section B. Did
Oh,
anyone
section
have?
B.
Yeah. Did anyone have anything on A that they?
Yeah, go ahead.
That's-
Vince.
Not on A. I have stuff on B, but I've read all of B, so I know what's coming. I know what I wanted to ask, if that's okay.
Sure. So yeah, Drew, the next sentence was not more than 3 members shall be registered with the same political party, and that's from our charter. The alternate members are neither landlords nor tenants, and they can't be the same political party. It's the one thing we were struggling with, and Jim Baldwin, when he gave his comment, raised this, is that we're not sure how hard it will be. We don't know yet how hard it will be to find 1 landlord and 1 tenant to serve on the commission. So we put in a section, at all times, there will be 1 landlord and 1 tenant, except that if it becomes impossible to appoint one or the other, then an elector of the town can fill the position. He thought that was unnecessary, but since we say at all times they'll have 1 landlord or 1 tenant, we thought we had to do something. Otherwise, if we can't get someone to serve as a landlord or tenant on the commission, can the commission even meet? I don't know. Like that isn't clear. So Pam, is that what you wanted to talk about?
So that's my concern. Well, you put the language in from the charter that says the political parties. I don't know that you really need that because it's sort of superfluous because it's in the charter and that's what's going to have to happen. But it's good for people to understand it, I guess. So I think I read through the comments from Attorney Baldwin, and I hear what you're saying and what your intent is, but I think you're overcomplicating the ordinance by doing it this way, and it's leading to things that I think are going to have issues down the line. My recommendation personally would not to be so specific in requiring this and change the language so that, you know, a tenant and a landlord are desired, or this committee should strive to have a tenant and a landlord so that the intent is there to try and give those people preference when choosing. Because this whole paragraph B is so bogged down. I think I just worry that in the future it's gonna create more of a headache. And it's going to be one of those user error things where people come back and we're like, can we just clean this up because it's overly complicated? But I understand your intent and it makes sense.
Right.
I just would move to, you know, recommends or, you know, whatever rather than shall or requires.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Josh, I invited all the committee members of our committee that created this ordinance to join the call. I hope that's okay. And would you mind if we let somebody respond? Because I know this was like a point we talked about a lot,
Right.
but how do you feel?
Yeah,
So-
that's fine.
So, Josh, it's Laura.
Yep.
So as long as it's not mandated that we do not need a tenant and a landlord, I'm fine with Pam's suggestion of making it just shorter, you know, short and sweet, and just say desired would be fine with me.
Okay. Anybody else in the committee
So-
have a strong
Is
feeling?
there, so there's nothing in the statute that says we have to have this language, is there?
Right.
Okay.
A lot, as Mark said, a lot of the statutes have it, or ordinances have it, and we like the idea, but it's not required.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Michelle. I was part of the group that was working on this, and I agree with what Pam you're saying, but I would like us to consider maybe language that's a little bit stronger than desired, but makes it clear that we're prioritizing it, but not holding up the process of appointment. So I don't know if we can pick perhaps just a different word that demonstrates a commitment to prioritizing a landlord and a tenant be seated.
How about of the 5 regular members, an effort will be made to appoint a landlord of residential properties and a residential tenant.
Or
Just use
just of the 5
prioritizing.
members. Right, yeah, exactly. Just of the 5 members, priority shall be given to at least one landlord and one tenant or something like that. I mean, you can massage the language legally.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And then
Okay,
my
so-
other,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. I had a second part to that, but if you want me to hold off, I will.
Pam, is it in the same section? You're still in B here?
Yeah, same section B.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so vacancies on the commission shall be filed within a reasonable time in the manner of original appointment for the unexpired portion of the term, down at the end. Any member of the commission may be reappointed in the manner of the original appointment. The only reason why I think that does start to cause confusion is because the charter is very specific about how you handle all of those procedures. I didn't know, did the town attorney weigh in on that? I personally would delete all of that because that's addressed in the charter. You can't be appointed for more than 2 terms. You know, that's not addressed here, but it sort of makes it seem like you could be. We know how we fill unexpired portions. We know if a person does a partial term, they're allowed to continue, and then they could potentially do 2 and a potential. So I personally think you should just delete that whole section because you don't need it. We know what our rules are and how that works.
Because of redundancy?
Yeah, it's redundant. Well, it's not even redundant.
It's covered in the
It-
charter, so we
It's
don't
covered
need
in the charter, and this language is a little wonky.
That's okay with me unless the committee has any issue with that. I think this might have been from the model ordinance, and maybe some charters don't have these procedures, but we do. So I'm okay with that personally.
I'm
Okay,
fine with that too.
Pam, are you good with that section for now? Okay,
Yes,
I have
thank you
one
very
thing
much.
thank you. I have one thing on B, and I assume this is intentional, but I just want to double check. It seems like we're saying that in the effort now to prioritize getting a landlord, we want a landlord of residential properties, plural. So is it intentional that you're going for somebody who has more than one rental, or would you be happy with someone who has one rental?
I don't think we intended to require multiple rentals, so we could change it to singular. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
a good idea.
Okay,
Okay.
anybody else on B? Okay, let's move forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. The appointment is made by the Board of Selectmen with approval of the RTM. The a quorum is 3. I know some of this is covered by our charter, but we had a general philosophy of trying to spell out as much as possible in this ordinance so that the commission could just look at one thing primarily to know what they needed to do. The members are going to be staggered so that there's changes every year of a member or two. And that's the case with other commissions. And then the health director and the director of community and economic development are ex officio members.
I have a question.
Mhm.
With a new commission like this, if everyone's appointed, how do you start to stagger? Does someone have a longer or a shorter initial?
That's in here. That's what this says. The first one appointed, one will serve for 1 year, 2 will serve for 2
Okay,
years.
thank you.
and 2 will serve for 3. Yeah. Pam, did you have?
Thank you, Pam Iacono. So my thing here, is it a requirement of the statute that it also has the approval of the RTM? The only reason I
No.
ask is that tends to slow down the process. You have
Yeah,
to
that
go
was
through the Board of
really-
Selectmen and then
I'm
go to
sorry,
the
go ahead.
RTM. So,
That was really important to our committee.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
not a big deal.
Okay.
Okay, and then the other thing is, as soon as you said economic development, that this was going to go into that world, I don't think it should.
Mark will be
For some
happy
of the
to hear
reasons
that.
that actually that Mark addressed, and the immediate catch to me when you said that was that it should be with the health department, and then knowing that they're also a Mark pointed out that they're a regulatory agency, that to me makes a lot more sense. So I would
Yeah.
strike the director of community and economic development. If you wanted to have somebody from the building department, that might make more sense because they're familiar with all of our zoning rules. They understand what can be condemned. They're involved with, blight and what's out in the community. And so personally, I think that this should be driven by the health department. If you wanted second eyes on it, my recommendation would be the building department and just get rid of the economic development altogether. They've got plenty of their own stuff going on, and as Mark mentioned, they're not regulatory agencies.
If I could hop in, sorry, it's Michelle McCabe. I think part of the rationale for including economic development is that I know the Affordable Housing Committee is under the aegis of economic development, and not to put stuff back onto Mark's plate that was just taken off, but we need to have, I think, somebody that is also aware of fair market value, that is aware of housing trends in the community. Because remember, this isn't just about unsafe living conditions. This is also about what is the amount that's being charged in rent. And I don't think that our health department director is going to be aware of that. That's my concern.
And also I agree with you, Michelle. And also, if as you'll see later in the ordinance, there's, if there's a health issue, that gets referred to the health department anyway, and that's why the health director's a ex officio member. But yeah, we thought that it really made sense. Perhaps what it should say is the director. I'm not sure, Mark, what your formal title is with affordable housing, but is that a separate title or is that?
Oh, it all gets wrapped into the same same realm. So it is. I mean, I'm not looking for any additional work here, and I know Sands isn't either. But there are some towns that do have our office play this role, and I think probably for the reasons stated, because they might provide staff support with respect to fair housing, which is different than fair rent, and also maybe in the realm of housing or affordable housing. But there's no question. I think down the road that this will have. We have a small office with 2 people, so I'm sure there will be some impact in terms of staffing and other costs if this truly does result in fairly robust activity. That I think that's the concern that we have, but we don't really know.
Honestly, if hopefully the Arts Commission actually gets formed one of these days, and if that gets busy too, then you well might need another person. I don't know, but both of those are going to be some work, perhaps.
So can I ask a question about this? Is it up to the RTM to determine which department is going to handle this, or should we just put this together and let the town decide how to apportion the roles and do the work? I mean, what if things change in a couple of years and the town wants to shift it to a different department? Now that we have to do an ordinance change, or should we just be saying, look, town, this is what we want, figure out how to do it?
That is another way in which it's been structured in other communities, whereby it's put on the administration to basically appoint someone to provide staff support to the commission. So that would be another option.
The language does say, or their designees, just saying that it doesn't say that it has to be either the health director or the economic development director. You could appoint other people to serve in your stead, which doesn't solve the problem of only having a couple of people in your department.
Right. Well, yeah, which is well intentioned, but let me tell you how that or designee works. It never does. Right, Mark?
I don't know who I would designate at this point.
Yeah, you have so many designees there but also this isn't saying
it might make more sense to think about it that way. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I think also this is saying these 2 directors are serve as ex officio members. It doesn't say that the director of community and economic development has to run this. That's right. I don't think anywhere else we say that. We really think it makes sense for Mark to do it. And I think, Mark, I know you don't want that extra work, but you've also been doing your homework about it and kind of see the logic too, I think. But this just says these 2 are ex officio members. So if at some point the office that had to handle it needed to change, we wouldn't have to change the ordinance. We could keep these 2 as ex officio members, which still would make sense to me, because you'd have the affordable housing person being able to comment on the rent, and the health director as well.
Okay, thanks, Karen. That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Powers of the commission. So they can receive complaints and communications about excessive rent charges and violations in housing accommodations, except accommodations rented on a seasonal basis, which is defined by the statute as not more than 120 days in a calendar year. Rental charge could be more than just the rent, I guess. It could be any fee that the landlord might impose additional fees. The commission can study rental housing and rents and things like that. That's what number 2 says. Stop me if anyone has comments. 3 is they can conduct hearings on complaints or requests for investigations. So that this is where if they conduct hearings, as Mark said, that might get into needing the town attorney to help with swearing someone in or getting testimony or things like that. That's sort of I think that'll just have to be worked out as a practical matter by Mark and the administration. They can require people to come to the hearings, including issuing subpoenas. This is all in the statute, I believe. Yeah, administering oaths, etc. They can determine whether or not the rent is so excessive as to be harsh and unconscionable. That's the standard in the statute. After the hearing, they can determine whether the housing accommodation fails to comply with any municipal ordinance or state statute. And then they would refer it to the appropriate department if that is the case. Determine after a hearing whether a landlord has engaged in retaliation. There's a separate section, a separate statute that prohibits landlords from engaging in retaliation that already existed. And so that's why that's in there. And well, we'll get to that. Order a reduction of excessive rent, order the suspension or reduction of further payment pending the repairs or whatever's required, and then do anything else in this first set of statutes is the fair rent. And then the others are about not retaliating. So anybody have any questions about that? Pam? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Josh, I'm sorry.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Pardon me. Karen, can you just go up a little bit? The compel, the attendance, conduct hearings, compel it. Okay, so the determining factors, I was reading the ordinance that Stratford just passed. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. But I saw that they're requiring a 2/3 vote to make, to lower people's rents or to make determinations or anything here. Where would that fit in that decision-making process? Are all of these things majority votes, or what's your recommendation here?
I think without it saying anything otherwise, it would be majority vote like every other commission. And I would be strongly opposed to what Stratford did because it would take the teeth out of the commission. It would make it harder perhaps to actually get fair rent, things approved. So I would be against that. The way this would be is just like every other commission or board or whatever in town, is that it would just be a pure majority vote.
Okay. Thank you.
Aaron, I have a question.
Okay.
Is this really applicable only in situations where there's an existing leaseor and their rent is going up, or is it for someone who wants to come in and they see a place they want to rent and they feel the rent is just too high and they protest that, or they bring this to the commission, or because it's two different situations.
I don't think
vastly different scenarios.
Yeah, I don't think that would. I would be shocked if that was the intention of this. I haven't looked at. I did look at some of the legislative history, but I didn't look at all of it. But I can't imagine that's something that they intend. I think the intention is just to deal with people who are already renting and having problems with their landlords, or the landlords hiking up the rent. But if anyone knows anything else, let me know. But
don't you think that if they aren't actually renting yet, they're not a tenant?
Right.
This is only
just for tenants is my
existing
question.
tenants. This is just for existing tenants.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, fair question. Anybody else have anything on 2, or should I go on to 3? Okay. So 3 is the factors that they're supposed to look at to determine whether the rent is excessive. So as I said before, their standard is the rent has to be harsh and or unconscionable. And the factors they look at are these in 3, that the rent charged for the same number of rooms and other housing accommodations that's why one reason the commission may want some rent studies, or why perhaps Mark's experience in affordable housing might help. I don't know. But the commission will need to know sort of what's market, what makes sense in order to know if it's fair. The number of bathrooms and facilities, what's included in the rent in terms of furniture, the size of the bedrooms, et cetera, repairs that may need to be made, taxes and overhead, which could make the rent have to be more expensive, whether the accommodations comply with ordinances and statutes relating to health and safety, the income of the petitioner and availability of other accommodations, I guess, the availability and expenses associated with utilities, damages that the tenant might have caused, the amount and frequency of increases in rental charges, and whether and the extent to which the income from an increase in rental charges has been or will be reinvested in improving the building.
Karen,
So
can I
those
ask, can I ask a question on? Can you scroll back up a little bit?
Yeah.
Number 8.
Uh-huh.
The income of the petitioner and availability of accommodations. What does that mean?
I guess we know this was from the statute, but I would say if the petitioner has lower income and they've been able to afford the rent, and then it's hiked up a lot and they can't find other accommodations that they can afford, then maybe that would be a factor in determining that it's unconscionable, that they've been able to afford it, now it's way past what they can afford.
So that's required by the statute. That must be in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. So that
Yeah.
totally takes away a lot from people's property rights. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that gets considered. It doesn't say that this is something
Right.
that the commission can take into consideration. Right? It's not a
Right.
Okay.
And these are only 12 things among all the things they can take into consideration.
So that's not a situation where your income is less, like you lost your job and you can't afford that apartment anymore.
I don't know because it's a new statute. I don't think there's been any, cases on it. I would think that would be an extenuating circumstance that would probably, I don't know how the commission would rule, but I would think they would say that doesn't mean the rent was unfair.
Yeah, that doesn't rise to being
It says
unfair for
harsh
the extra
and
job.
unconscionable, which basically means it's,
It
has
being excessive.
unlivable, like.
No, well,
Shouldn't
the
have control.
sentence reads, I'm not talking about the other sections. I'm talking about number 8, which is the income of the petitioner.
Mhm.
That's specific to income and the availability of accommodations. That's what I was trying to drill down on.
But these are factors in deciding whether it's harsh and unconscionable. And I don't think the commission would say if somebody lost their job, that suddenly this rent is harsh and unconscionable because of that. They'd
Got
look at
it.
all these factors. I would think to me, that wouldn't be the intention, but
Okay, thank you.
okay.
If
Did
I,
someone else?
Karen,
Yeah.
the one thing I
Oh,
did
go ahead.
notice, this does track the statutory language with the exception that there is number 2 in the statutes is omitted in your proposed ordinance, and it says the sanitary conditions existing in the housing accommodations in question. I don't know if that was intentional or.
No, it was inadvertent, and Jim Baldwin mentioned that too. So we should definitely add that back in.
Okay.
That's definitely not meant to be deleted.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm struggling with all of this. And the interest of disclosure, I'm a landlord.
Mhm.
I
Go on the commission.
no, thank you. There's several aspects of what I'm seeing. I see this as being tenant driven, but being a landlord, I'm concerned about whether, now my fate rests in the hands of some commission where before it would rest in Superior Court, where I think it belongs. But how is this going to affect my rights as a landlord when it comes to, summary process and non-payment of rent? I mean, I see this as opening up everything to just abuse. I mean, yeah, that's just what I'm seeing on this. You know, you
Mhm.
want to assume that everyone's going to play by the rules, but as a landlord, what am I supposed to do if somebody, you know, says, oh, they lost their job, all of a sudden it's tight making rent payment. Oh, the rent's excessive. I'm going to stop paying rent for now until this goes through. Well,
Mm.
now am I prohibited from starting a summary process? Is
I
that
don't think,
considered retaliation? I'm just saying, guys.
I hear what you're saying.
Well,
Yeah.
I know, but you know,
I think if we're reading the language of the commission's purpose properly, this isn't an example. They're not talking about circumstances where somebody has been paying rent regularly and then all of a sudden makes a decision that now all of a sudden it's excessive. I think this commission is, first, the commission can reject people's claims of excessive rent. So it's not as though every single matter that somebody chooses to put before the commission makes it past the initial review. But isn't there also language in the, I thought, in the statute that it eventually does end up in court, does it not?
It can, they can, both sides, I believe the landlord can appeal it. And also the town can bring it to court to enforce it. But I mean, I understand your question, Ed, but I think, I guess this has been in effect for many years for some towns, and people have figured out how it works. So without reading the cases on it, I imagine, as Michelle said, it's not meant to allow tenants to just stop paying for no reason. But it could, I suppose, in certain unusual circumstances, it could slow down the cogs that you're used to being able to use when somebody stops paying rent.
Karen,
This is required by
Karen,
the state,
Karen,
right, Karen?
Yeah, this is required by the state. What, Ed? Go ahead, I'm listening.
I know the intent is noble, but so is 830G, and look where that got us. I just don't like it when Hartford tells us what to do and then walks away.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, guys. I mean, I've lost all faith in Hartford and what they write. I mean, I get it. The intent is noble, but it's going to be abused. That's just that's where I am.
Okay, that may be the
So
this
do we have a
this is
history of this? Can we find out for Ed? Is there a way, Mark maybe knows that, are there cases where people are
It doesn't
bringing
even matter what the
frivolous?
history is because it's required by the state. And
No,
as
no,
a
I'm just
mother
trying
who has
to,
4
Right,
kids that are
let's
landlords, I
bring it.
agree
Let's
with you, Ed, but my kids have had
Mark's face is
rats in their
clear.
houses that are been like not dealt with for over a year. They've had leaky ceilings. It goes both ways. So we're required to do this by the state, and whether you like it or you don't like it, it's not really an option, correct?
Could I ask a question here? If I'm understanding this right, I think the intent here is this is when a landlord raises the rent, right? And this is what Jeff was getting at too. Like this is about a situation where our rent goes up. And do we ever say that in the ordinance? Is that one of the setup statements that this is about when a rent goes up for an existing tenant? Because I think that's different than a lot of other things that could come
I
through
don't
here.
know if it's only that though, Josh, because like if somebody has, their toilet hasn't worked for 6 months, they may, as I read it, they may bring a complaint saying, hey, we're paying $2,000 a month, but our toilet doesn't work, or that's a small thing, a toilet not working, but maybe it becomes, yeah, right, it's not small.
Not really.
Maybe it becomes excessive in the light of all those other factors, even though they've been paying that rent and there was no increase.
I mean, I think that does seem like the wrong way to get at a faulty toilet is to go to the Fair Rent Commission.
If you look at number 1,
Mm-hmm.
it says receive complaints, etc., concerning alleged excessive rental charges, and then you look below, and in quotes it says rental charge includes any fee or charge in addition to rent that is imposed or sought to be imposed upon a tenant by a landlord.
Mm-hmm.
So it says this commission is about rent. It's not about faulty toilets. It's not about those could be the context for why the rent is excessive, but those are I think what we're trying to establish here is that this ordinance is about an existing tenant when the rent goes up excessively on the existing tenant. Is that the intent?
it also says alleged violations. Oh, well, that says including retaliation and then a bunch of other state statutes, which I don't know, because I know that there is that piece of sanitary conditions as part of this as well, I thought.
Yeah.
It's
So I
not,
Yeah,
think,
there's a piece that talks about violating, yeah, sanitary conditions or things that haven't been working. That's in there too.
My son was paying, and his roommates were paying 6,000 a month and the refrigerator didn't work for 5 months. So, then the landlord was trying to charge him to fix the refrigerator. So maybe that would fall into something like this, right?
I would think so because it says rental charge includes any fee or charge in addition to rent that is imposed or sought to be imposed.
Mhm. And includes any charge that is already in effect. So that means even if it's the rent's the same, but the situation has changed so that the rent
They have to
now
pay for the
excessive.
refrigerator repair though. They didn't.
Yeah. In contrast to what they're getting as, again, this is
Let me
why.
ask a question. Like right now, though, prior to this ordinance, what is the recourse? What does a tenant do in this situation? Is it taken? Maybe this is a question to Ed. Is it taken to court? If a tenant feels, whoa, hold on, we're paying for this lease and it doesn't even have a working refrigerator for 5 months or whatever. How is it currently right now dealt with? Is it taken to court or is it worked out directly with the landlord or how is it done? Does anybody know?
I think it would be most likely a complaint to the health department under our housing code.
Mm.
Now, rental units are supposed to have a certificate of rental occupancy as well, but not all do.
And just to point out, this is called the Fair Rent Commission. I think this is about rent. I mean, my feeling is this is not about the toilet not working or the refrigerator not working. I think this is supposed to be about rent and whether the rent has gone up excessively. I mean, that seems to be the intent. But again, I don't know what these statutes are, so maybe there's other stuff that's sort of unclear to me. But
Yeah, it's really not only about raises in rent. If you look at that A1 again, it's saying if somebody alleges violations, then that could make the rent they're already charging. The end of section 1, it said includes any charge that's already in effect. It could make the rent that they're already paying excessive in light of all those factors that we looked at, because I don't think the refrigerator or the toilet would do it, but maybe there's a big leak in the ceiling or there's no heat or something like really significant that is a health and safety matter, that suddenly the 2,000 or 3,000 they're paying a month for rent is excessive in light of that. At least that's how this reads, that it doesn't have to be an increase in rent. It could be a charge that's already in effect, but because of other factors, they're saying it's excessive.
Believe me, Karen, when my son and his friends didn't have a refrigerator, they spent a whole lot of money on takeout.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know.
Anyway, I'll stop with the personal stories.
But I will say this has been in effect for a long time, I think 20 more years, the statute. So the only change really is that now we have to do it because we have a population of 25,000 or more. So there is history we could look at in the towns that have had it. I just haven't personally looked at that.
Do you mind if I just ask a clarifying thing, and excuse me for my ignorance? So if someone has a legal accessory apartment that they're renting out to someone for $2,000 a month, and they decide, unrelated to the accessory apartment, they're going to put a new roof on their house, and the income from that apartment helps support their mortgage and expenses, and they're going to do this new roof, but it has nothing to do with the accessory dwelling unit. And they decide that they think and they know that they can get $4,000 a month for it. So they jump from 2 to 4. Can a person file a complaint on that? I'm just trying to understand that. Is that how that works?
As I read it, I would say yes. And the commission would then have to see if it fits if it's harsh and unconscionable, looking at all those factors. to see if that's unfair. It would depend on the terms of the lease also, if there's even a lease.
I would also
Okay.
think most like when you buy or rent, it's bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, which would not be impacted by a new roof. So,
That's
your
not
rent price.
that's not what I'm saying, Drew. I'm saying
I'm
I'm the
saying an
homeowner,
upgrade that
and
doesn't
that's
impact
it's
what is based on. Rent is based on square footage, bedrooms and bathrooms.
You're
there's
saying
another
just if
provision
they
that says if
choose.
you make accommodations in the place, that you're allowed to raise the rent. That's why I was pitching this different scenario, and a homeowner who needs the money from the income on this. So I think this impedes a little bit on personal property rights, but that's just my personal opinion.
Okay, Ed, go.
Yeah, thanks. Pam, you're spot on. What you're not saying is what I know is that from being in the industry, there's a lot of sweetheart deals out there, speaking exactly to what you're saying, that people just do this, if they have an accessory apartment just to cover some expenses, so forth and so on. And then they realize the value of what they have and they want to make more on it, which there's nothing wrong with that because supply and demand sets the market, not the state of Connecticut. And they want to change that. Now they're forbidden to do that. You're right. What you're getting at is right. And not that I find it offensive, but I think this is going to do a little bit more damage than it is good, because it's going to make people wake up and say, oh, well, this is worth more. I should really get ahead of the 8 ball and charge more because that's what the market is. And I got to eliminate these sweetheart deals. I'm just telling you that I really think that's what's going to happen.
Okay, so we're coming up on an hour here, and we have our big agenda item ahead of us still.
Yeah.
What do we want to do? Where are we at? Do we have more to cover here, Karen, still?
Well, if you want me to walk through the rest, there's a couple more pages, but I can skim through it.
Yeah, you want to skim
and
through
I
it
have
for
to
us?
say it's mostly, the language of the statute that we have to approve anyway, unfortunately. So, okay, that's the sorry, I'm just losing my,
Go back to the determination of excessive rent.
is that
That
above?
part, maybe that'll help clarify for them. Maybe.
Well, we did, that was what we've been talking about, right? These are the factors that you look
Yeah.
at to determine.
Right, the number, most.
Yeah. Okay. Then procedures. They notify. The person files a complaint. The commission has to send out a notification to everybody, including a notification to the landlord not to retaliate. If there is an allegation that it violates certain codes, the commission notifies the appropriate office so they can investigate. It's encouraged that it's encouraged that the parties just try to reach an agreement, because it would be much more logical if they can just sort of discuss it and come to an agreement rather than have to go through a whole hearing. But then it goes through what the hearing procedures are. And then the rent reduction orders, et cetera, section 5, that the court can say you have to reduce the rent, or they can say, not the court, the commission, or they can say you don't have to pay any rent until the landlord fixes XYZ. So there's a variety of things they can do. If the person, let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. You can't retaliate against the tenant for bringing an action. Any person aggrieved by an order of the commission can appeal to the Superior Court, Ed, so you still can do that. And then if a landlord doesn't comply with the orders, the commission can fine them. And then after 5 days, if they still don't do it, then every day they get $100 fine. After that, the commission can hire a lawyer or use the town attorney to enforce it. That's pretty much it. Any other questions or?
Pam, go
I have a
ahead.
question just on the fines. Those are state driven. Those are statute driven, rather.
Yes.
The fines, Karen. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my only comment, and thank you for doing this. I know we're required to do it by law. My understanding is Representative Leeper voted against this up in Hartford, and I do have a concern. I have a lot of concerns about this. Hartford coming down and dictating these types of things. I get it. It's been on the books a lot of places for a while. But that example that I shared is something that is of concern to me. And I would personally, I know, Karen, you said you're adamantly against it, but if someone wants to take action and lower a rent or instruct someone to reduce a fee, I personally would not support this unless it did require a 2/3 vote of the body. I think this is something that needs to be really, really measured, and I would be a lot more comfortable with a supermajority to do that. Without that, you know, I'm when it comes to the floor would not support it. But
Ask a question
I
about
understand
that.
it.
Yep,
Can I ask a question? Wait, so there's 5 members, right?
yes.
So
Yep.
what is a 2/3 vote with a 5-member body? Is that 4 out of 5?
It's
Yeah.
4.
Right? Yeah.
Yep. So it's like ZBA. They need that. It's not, there's no, you know, there's precedent for it.
Thank you.
Anybody else or?
I just wanted to say one quick thing as parting words that maybe would make this a little, I mean, again, we've been saying over and over again, it's required anyway, but might make it a little bit more palatable, is that this actually is an opportunity to put a situation in front of more than just a judge. It's less onerous, at least for the people involved. It's certainly onerous for the people sitting on the commission. I won't argue with that. But also what's great is that you do, because of the language of this particular statute, there is a landlord and there is a tenant that's on this commission that can argue their perspectives. And I think that actually a landlord could have a much better shot at, you know, making a reasonable case in front of, you know, 5 people, and they're one of the commissioners. So I do think this actually might allow for a lot more fairness for both sides. And then again, let's remember at the end of the day, if people don't agree with the commission, they can still go to court. It's not, you know, written in stone and everybody has to deal with it. So I think, you know, this might actually not be the worst thing in the world. Maybe.
I agree with that sentiment, Michelle. It does. If you have that landlord on the commission, that's the point. I agree.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add or ask? Ed?
Yeah, thanks. I'm a no on this at this level. I'm a no at this on the floor. You know, I appreciate the intent, but you know, I've been a landlord for decades. I mean, I know housing court. We have a court specifically dedicated to housing. You know, you have tenants there, landlords there. That's where your rights lay. I don't want to see another. I don't care that Hartford mandated it. Just because Hartford says it has to be, I don't care. I mean, I'll vote no on that, whatever. But I just don't want to see another level obfuscate people's rights. Now, I just don't. I mean, I see this as it's going to confuse the issue. What if a commission comes back and says, Ed, you can't charge this rent? And then, well, but then I can bring this person to court under the lease. They're violating the lease. The lease hasn't been changed. It's a whole Pandora's box we're going into, and nobody's going to answer these questions. It's going to have to, any question we have is going to have to be adjudicated, and it's going to take decades to set law precedent on this. So it's just ridiculous. I'm a no on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? We're at an hour. I'd love to move on, take a vote on this one and move on to our next item, unless anyone has anything they want to add.
I'm not sure we had a motion, so I'm going to move to.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Jeff.
Thank you.
Jeff, did
So-
you want to say something? I just saw your name.
Was
Right.
anything
No,
changed though
I
in the
would-
draft that we're looking at? Can we just delineate what we're voting on? You know, if there have been any changes made, and just delineate
Yes.
that for us so we know what we're voting on.
There was the item that was not included for sanitary.
Yep.
You're going to shorten the B. We're going to make that shorter and not be so, take out some of, you know, the first section 1B.
The
where Pam-
redundancy
Pam
of
suggested
repeating the charter information.
Yeah.
1B will change to that an effort will be made to include one landlord and one tenant. And
No, priority.
yeah.
Prioritize.
Yeah, right. And then taking out the last two sentences about vacancies being filled because we already have that in the charter.
And possibly changing it to a landlord of a single unit as opposed to
Yes.
multiple.
Property, right. Yep. And then, yes, as Drew said, adding that one other factor that was inadvertently dropped about health and safety issues.
Okay.
I
Any other
do have
discussion?
a
So the motion would be to
Hold on, Josh, I had
Go
a
ahead.
quick question. You said there was a template that was used from, if not CCM, the other entity up in Hartford. Was
Home,
how much
Connecticut.
was added to that to that template? I mean, what additional language was put in beyond that by the
I don't have a red line right now of it. Might be able to create that, but
Hmm.
I think, and committee members help me remember, but I think we had added a lot of stuff. We had added quite a bit about the town attorney helping with things, and Mark pointed out that that could get expensive and wouldn't necessarily be, it wasn't in the statute. It would maybe be unnecessary, so we took that out. And other than that, I don't think we made landlord and tenant was added.
No, I think that's
Oh, no.
actually in that.
You're
Yeah.
right. That is in that.
There was a time where we did fiddle with it a bit more, Jeff. Like we were looking at other towns' ordinances and taking some pieces of it. But when we went back to Mark and looked over what we had done, we ended up going back to being very faithful to the model.
Right.
And you said the town attorney has looked at it.
Yes. Yep. He had a couple of questions, a couple of comments, sort of like Pam mentioned, where there were things we have in here that are in the charter and don't have to be in here, but they don't have to be changed. And then the landlord tenant requirement was something that he raised as a confusing.
Okay.
So I'd
Any
like,
other discussion? Okay, I don't see any. So I think Karen, you're making a motion so you're including the amendments that you just outlined. Your motion
Right.
would be to pass this. And do we have a second? Jill, thank you. Okay, all those in favor?
aye.
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 Wait a second, I'm
Aye.
writing this down.
Drew, do you want help or can you see us or what do you want?
Seconded by Jill. Okay, yes. I think
Karen,
our-
Jill, Josh.
So, Karen, Jill, Josh, Drew.
And anyone opposed?
No.
I see Ed, Pam, Jeff.
Ed,
And I think
and
that's all of us.
Jeff.
So there
Okay.
are no
So it
abstentions.
moves out of committee.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks
so
to
much for having us.
yes,
Appreciate
thanks for
it.
guys.
Thank
joining.
you, LNA people. Have a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
night.
Thank you, Mark.
I had them on the roll call. Is that correct?
They were in attendance as public, or as co-sponsors of the
So
RTM
We have
co-sponsors.
the
Yeah.
roll call for the committee and then the attendees per the.
Sure,
Okay.
sure. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to our noise ordinance amendments. Jill, do you want to take it away? Are you going to share a screen, Jill, or do you want me to share?
Try.
Yes, please. I think it would be good if you do. So give it a shot.
You
if
know,
wouldn't
I'm
mind.
not great with technology, so I will try. Sorry, my computer is very slow, so I'm granting my system preferences.
So just to set the stage here, although we know this already, I'm just stretching, killing time here. We're looking at this. We looked at it once before. We're looking at it again to try and review some of the changes that were made since our last meeting. So hopefully LNA can pass this through and get it to the larger body.
So when I grant permission, what do I say? General, desktop, and screensaver? What do I grant permission to?
I'm not really sure,
Oh,
actually.
it's never done this for you?
No. Like all I do is click the button share and
Ew.
go.
There's a
Okay.
share button on the WebEx at the bottom.
I did that, but it got to my system preferences. I don't know if it's different with an Apple computer, but
No.
Mm.
I mean, you must have some preference that's set. So I'll share my screen. I have it
okay.
here.
Sorry, Josh.
No worries. No worries. Just let's see. I got to make sure I have the right one up. So give me a second here. I don't want to do that. Yeah. Okay. Think this should do it.
Oh.
All right. So you're seeing it
think-
now?
Well, that's the memo. I think
Right.
maybe
And
it
it's at
should
the
be
back of it,
redlined.
right?
Okay.
So I'm not going to really be able to see anybody now. So in an organized manner, please call out when you want to talk. All right. So Jill, do you want to just walk us through like Karen just did, and I'll scroll along here.
Yeah, sure. So I thought I'd go over the highlighted sections because that's really all the new stuff.
Yep.
And as you can see in this first page, a new section was added for variances, which I thought would address some people's concerns that there weren't enough ways for someone to have a little bit more flexibility with the rules. And it is something standard that other towns do have, especially with daytime hours. It makes sense to have variances. This change to the daytime hours in terms of spelling it out was a request of an RTM colleague. They thought it would make more sense and be more straightforward to have it spelled out. There are changes to the actual daytime hours, which I'll cover when we talk about the nighttime hours. So with these nighttime hours, this is new. They weren't touched originally, but in looking at the state regulations, I had originally thought that the state regulations were guidance, but it's actually a baseline requirement. So if a town has a noise ordinance, it has to be at least as stringent as the state deep regulations. And our weekend schedule violates that rule. And so the state's hours for nighttime are 10 p.m. through 7 a.m. for nighttime. And what we've done, our ordinance has been non-compliant, and I'm not really sure why no one's caught that before, but I thought we should really fix that. And I decided that it seems like we wanted a tiered approach so that the weekday ended a little bit earlier than the weekends. And that's why I incorporated a change to the weekday too, but the state regs don't necessitate that. Only the weekend schedule really needs to be changed down to 10 to 8.
This is PMI Kono. Are we
Yeah.
doing the same thing we did last time, just jumping in? Is that okay?
Please.
I just want to follow the right process. Okay, sorry. Can you just clarify again, Jill? So we are not allowed to have the noise ordinance we have as written with the hours because it's not as stringent as what the state has.
Right.
Okay. And the town attorney concurred with that? Like we have, like that's not a must. It's not a should.
It's pretty clear in the statute that the town ordinances. So I could read you the language if you want. But Jim has.
I mean, I read it. I mean, what happens? The ordinance, people fine us. Like, what's the penalty if ours is a little bit more? We're allowing an hour more than the state.
It's not really a penalty. It's just that the police have to enforce the state regulations too. So it just becomes confusing. So the system that we have right now is that we're functioning under the misconception that there were no daytime hours. There are daytime hours because it's required by the state regulations, and we were, as a town, we were supposed to be protecting those rights that people were supposed to have for those protected decibel levels in the daytime already. If we don't incorporate it into our ordinance, the police would still have to be
They're defaulting to
enforcing
that
it.
anyway.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Okay, so
Yes.
now my second part of my question is, so now the way you wrote it, the hours between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. Sunday through Friday morning, is that read as the statute, or you made ours more stringent?
That is more stringent. We don't have to do that. I thought that we had wanted a tiered approach to protected hours. So to distinguish the weekday versus the weekend. If we don't want to do that, we don't have to, the state regs don't require us to change that weekday schedule.
Okay, I personally want to stay with the state stuff. I don't want the tiered approach, and I want to stay with since we're coming down so much, that would be my preference, is to leave it with the state and to follow what the state is doing.
Does anyone else have any input on that?
Yeah, I would, Jill, I would probably agree with that, but I have a bigger question, and that is, if there are 66 towns out of 169 that have a noise ordinance, that means there are 103 that don't. What necessitates us even having one? Why don't we just follow state statute and leave it at that and call it a night?
Well, those 103 towns do have protections because they go by the deep regulations, but this was something that we decided back in, I think, the early 1980s, that we as a town wanted to craft our own particular noise regulations so that it was crafted to suit our town's needs. And I think that most of the towns that are very much like us in character and nature have decided to have their own noise ordinances. It's a quality of life issue, and it's a way to address and to be very responsive to residents when they have particular issues that are maybe particular to our town.
I'd like to say something too. Every town is different. There's different density. You have suburban, you have rural. So, you take your own individual town and you have your own individual ordinance. So there might not, some towns might have looser, sometimes might have more stringent, but obviously that's because the makeup of the town, the population of the town, and the density of the town vary.
Anything else on this section?
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me, Josh?
Yep, got you.
Okay. Ed Bateson. I see what you're saying, Jill, about the tiered approach. I thought the tiered approach when we had 11 p.m. was fine, but if we're losing an hour, I'd rather keep it uniform throughout. I don't want to take away more fun time by going to 9 o'clock just to keep a tiered approach. I'd rather see it go in sync with state statute. I just want to clarify, when you say, you've mentioned a couple times here, deep regulation. What are we referring to? I'm under the impression that this is actually what we're modeling is off, the state statutes. A deep regulation is not state statute. So I just want to make sure we're actually adopting something that is statutory and not an agency regulation.
They're agency regulations, and they're required by the state for towns to follow whatever is established, just like regulation of toxic waste. It's a deep regulation. So I really appreciate following regulations, and I think it's important, and I think that we're required to as a town.
Jill, thank you for working on this for over 12 months. I really appreciate all your hard work.
But also we didn't model this after the state deep model. We used it, we referenced it, but for the most part, we used other towns to structure this. And what we already had as pre-existing model.
Okay, anything else at this point in the conversation, or should we move on? All right, let's move on. I don't see anybody, but call it out because I can't see everybody. Right, I'm the one who has to move along. Yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
Josh.
Yeah.
So I added this language to the plainly audible definition because it became clear in our discussions that people didn't understand that this new standard was limited only to noise produced by sound production devices. So each time I had an opportunity throughout the ordinance to clarify that, I did. And I did that in this definition, hopefully.
Okay, I'm going to keep going unless somebody calls out.
Okay.
Going for the next highlight here.
Okay, this is another example of clarifying the plainly audible standard and that it only applies to sound production devices, and the chart as well. I wanted to simplify the chart. I didn't think it was necessary to delineate the daytime and nighttime hours. And I thought just shortening the amount of verbiage in here would make it more understandable for people looking at it. And then the 45 dBA change from 50 to 45 comes from the regulations, the state regulations. For residential, it's 45 dBA at nighttime.
Jill,
Oh, sorry.
I'll be quick. So plainly audible noise produced by sound production devices, I get that. And then is there a parallel that you could add to the chart for measured by sound level meter? Like, should there be a descriptor of what those sound, like, is there a way to just so the chart is completely self-explanatory? Does that work?
I could maybe say measured by noise levels, measured by sound level meter, and then it's really anything. The sound level meter measurements apply to any noise. It's up to the police to decide which to use. If a sound production device is involved, it's up to them to determine whether they want to use the plainly audible standard or a decibel standard.
So the sound level meter would be used for any noise complaint.
Yeah.
And you could say something like that in the chart, and then plainly audible noise, it's optional. Like, does it make sense to say that that it's an optional method that the police could use only for sound production devices? I'm just trying to, like you said, to be as clear as possible on what we're saying here.
Gosh, I think we only have one noise reader in the whole town, right, Jill?
I'm not saying I'm just trying to, for language purposes.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm making a change here. I'm just making a grammatical sort of like wordy change. All right, I'm done. Pam, go ahead.
Just to clarify, so that by default, obviously, the daytime hours are the ones that are not nighttime hours.
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm a little concerned about this definition of a sound production device. So if I have the windows open and I'm playing practice piano really loud and, it's waking up my neighbor's baby and they call the police on me, is that an issue? Like pianos, somebody doing their guitar lesson, somebody wrote in about, a religious experience on the Jewish holiday where they go out and, blow the horn. I mean, are all these issues, is that really what we're trying to capture? Or are you really just talking about people playing their radio and a speaker too loud?
It does apply to instruments. It doesn't have to if in our definition for sound production device, but I do want to highlight that our noise ordinance has always applied to these things. And the police should have been enforcing those situations all along, especially considering what the noise level requirements are for the decibel levels of the state regulations and their daytime protections.
So we've had language in there that defined what a sound production device is. That's in the current ordinance.
No, it's not. That's a newly added definition, but our ordinance has always covered instruments or noise produced from instruments or any kind of loud noise that would exceed a decibel level delineated in our ordinance.
I guess it's just kind of pointed out the obvious for me. I don't know that I really want to be able to go after, Mary Jo who's doing piano lessons, or, somebody else who wants to go and, forgive my ignorance for not knowing the proper term for the horn during a Jewish holiday, but I don't think anybody should be penalized for that either.
Well, then your neighbors won't call.
My neighbors don't call. We live in harmony over here in our lovely little District 8.
It's supposed to be applying to excessive noise. The police will use their discretion whether that's the situation and the complaint constitutes excessive noise, and it will be determined by very basic sound level measurements from a noise level meter, or whether they feel like it's plainly audible.
Okay.
So I'm confused by this one, Jill. I think in your memo it said that it was a 24-hour cycle of,
Yes.
but here it
Originally.
seems like it's different. So I'm confused.
Originally, it was a 24-hour reset, and we had deleted that when we submitted our revisions. It was the only thing that the town attorney had pointed out to see whether or not the police were on board with that. And they had I think maybe they didn't notice that was changed. And when I pointed it out to them, they said that they wanted a reset. We were all uncomfortable with a 24-hour reset, which really doesn't prevent any kind of recidivism, because what it means is that someone's issued a warning and then they get tiered amounts of fines, and after 24 hours it completely resets. It's a complete anomaly for our own town code, and it's an anomaly for other town codes. I haven't found a 24-hour reset in anywhere. So what I did to compromise was incorporate a 1-year reset, which is what our alarms ordinance uses. Our recovery of costs ordinance is a 3-year reset. So I thought that this was a compromise, and Norwalk also uses a 1-year reset. It was only at town I could find with language similar.
So a person could get fined multiple times the same night, or it could be anytime over the course of a year. If you get called back, you're at risk of an increased fine. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm gonna keep going. Scroll out, call out if you want, people.
This isn't a new addition, just to address people's concerns that the ordinance was going to apply to kids laughing or talking, or loud parties and the noise produced by voices. So we didn't think that any of the decibel readings that we already have, or even the plainly audible standard, definitely can't apply to that, because it's only for sound production devices. But we just wanted to make it clear that it does not apply to that. This was to clarify the open to public language. I was taken aback by some of people's concerns with the open to public language, since the pre-existing language already said noise created by public celebrations and on-site recreational sporting activities. So it's clearly already limited to celebrations that are open to the public. And we wanted to emphasize that because of what was occurring. We wanted to make sure that this subsection wasn't used to go around any requirements for town properties like Burr the Burr Mansion or Penfield. So instead, I took out the additional open to public language, and I clarified that I used examples that it can apply to parades, sporting events, concerts, and block parties, some of the things that people were concerned about. I also think that this would apply to PTA carnivals, school events, because they're sanctioned by the town of Fairfield. If I'm not correct in saying that, we can also add sanctioned by the state of Connecticut, the town of Fairfield, and the Fairfield Public Schools, if that makes people more comfortable. But I think that what is there would cover school events. But I also wanted to specify that this exclusion doesn't apply to private rentals of town-owned buildings.
And can you
Okay.
explain what that means? What does that mean? What is the intent that it does not apply to private rentals of town-owned bodies? What problem are you looking to solve
Because
there?
those are not public events. I mean, I think that the language itself is clear. It should be clear. It should be clear that it's only for public celebrations, but I wanted to make sure that there was no misunderstanding in terms of if this were an event that was permitted through Park and Rec, but it's for a private party, it should not be an exclusion from the noise ordinance.
So let's just drill down on this. So I'm having a wedding at Burr Mansion, and they're playing music. So, and that's my own private wedding. So I'm subject to the noise ordinance. But if the town is having a party inside doing the 365th anniversary party, they're allowed to make a lot of noise.
Yes, if it's sanctioned by the town of Fairfield and it's a public event that all people could possibly buy a ticket. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that every single person can fit in that room, but that people could possibly be in there. Yes, it's a public event and that would be excluded from our noise ordinance, but a private party that the town is basically functioning as a business entity, and it's a commercial activity, is subject to the noise ordinance. And we need to implement soundproofing measures to ensure that people can have those kinds of events and not infringe on the residential zones rights, because I'm not sure how.
But the noise ordinance doesn't address sound panelists. So specific to P, noise created by public celebrations and on-site recreational or sporting activities which are sanctioned by the state of Connecticut or the town of Fairfield. Was that was the original language in the ordinance?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So noise created by on-site recreational, I mean, you could say that if I'm renting the Burr Mansion on-site, that's a recreational activity that I'm doing on that site. You are adding this thing that is now prohibiting.
No, I mean,
it is now but that you're
town
changing.
Understood it that way too. It's even incorporated into the contracts that we have for Burr and for Penfield, because they had a cutoff time that correspond with our nighttime hours. But this is clearly meant to apply only to public celebrations.
Okay. Is this going to impede our ability to rent out those facilities to earn rental money from them?
Only if we can't stay within these requirements that ensure that noise is not excessive. And I think that that's important to protect people's property rights in those residentially zoned areas. I'm not sure whether the town even has permits to operate commercial activities in these residential zones. All of these areas are residential zones. They should be functioning, the town should be functioning just the same as any other entity. They need a permit to be functioning as having this commercial activity, and that would also require them to to implement the appropriate soundproofing measures,
Because that's what's in the regs.
because
If
that's
they
what
pull the permit, if they pull the permit, that's what's in the regs.
Because they're in a residential zone.
If
No,
yeah,
I'm
I mean,
asking Jill. Is that what's in the regs?
I'm not sure what you mean, Pam.
Well, you're saying that they would be in compliance if they're pulling the permit because that's what's in the regs. That's what I'm inferring from that statement.
Well, there are a couple different reasons why they'd be in compliance with that, because for a special permit, there would have to be a public process, and people should be able to operate a commercial activity within a residential zone. And yeah,
So the reason I'm asking, I'm just trying to find out, is this then just redundant?
with saying this exclusion does not apply to private rentals of town-owned buildings.
Yeah, if they're covered under the regs anyway.
It is, yes, it's rephrasing basically what I think the first sentence is, but I thought it was important to restate it.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for fixing Q. I hated to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to say. So I'm glad that, people will still be able to pull permit and just, work within the permitting process there.
I'm grateful to Chief McCarthy for helping me find a solution to that one too.
And it's not highlighted, but this addition of the public demonstrations, noise created by public demonstrations and or protests, provided that the activity is conducted during daytime hours. So you're allowed to be noisy and demonstrate during the day, but you're not allowed to be noisy and demonstrate at night. Is that what that means?
Yes. Yeah, and this was specifically, I had the event where there was a demonstration outside of the DTC, and I was concerned about infringing people's First Amendment rights with the noise ordinance, and I think it's important to be able for people to be able to have the ability to demonstrate in that way, but during the daytime.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Jill, it's Ed Bateson. Can I jump in?
Go ahead.
I see what you're saying about people's right to demonstrate, but if you turn on the national news and you see these people in front of Pelosi's house and what they do, I don't want to encourage that. I mean, I get it. If you want to go on the town green or something like that, I get that. But,
I'm not sure this is encouraging it, but I do feel like it's important to make a statement in support of people's First Amendment rights.
And that's fine. I just, it's when you see what happens at the national level, I just, I just think it is guaranteed by the First Amendment. I get it. I would just leave it at that. I don't see why we need to, document it here. And
I thought it was a little complicated because I do think that something like a noise ordinance can be applied neutrally to different political views. And I think that means it could be used to shut down, since it's a neutral law, I think it could be used to shut down political demonstrations like that. And I'm not sure that's something I'm supportive of.
Okay.
If other people are, we can make that change, but I wasn't comfortable with that.
I just doubt that public demonstrations are going to be shut down because they're loud. They might be shut down because they're unruly and generating mob mentality, but I think if they're just loud, which almost by definition a protest will be loud, you can't imagine it's going to be shut down and stopped because it's loud during the day. So I hadn't really thought about it, but I think Ed makes a good point. It's almost covered. It's probably superfluous.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
Tennessee 3, those two legislators were thrown out because they used a bullhorn, so it can happen.
Well, that was within a legislative chamber versus outside in the streets.
So, okay,
It
so
was
I
a
have a couple things.
demonstration.
Okay, so I have a couple things to throw in here. One is, would we have in P that if an event is sanctioned by the state or the town, would a protest where people get a permit would be a sanctioned event, and where they don't get a permit would be an unsanctioned event? Is that the cutoff that we could live with? And just so that means we take out R, and it's just if it's a sanctioned event, and we could even add in there like a demonstration as in that list, as long as it's sanctioned.
Yeah,
I don't know,
I
it's just
think
an
that
idea.
makes more sense, Josh, because again, the protests aren't really an issue because they're loud. Yes, they're loud, but it's because they're unruly. So I think you're right.
But I don't support that because you can't always get a permit. Sometimes if a governmental agency is the one granting the permit, then you give the power to the person granting the permit.
Yeah, that's true.
Did they have a permit to demonstrate outside of the DTC with bullhorns? I mean, I think that the noise
No, they
ordinance
did
could
not.
have been used to shut that down.
Okay.
I
Um,
would just, for my 2 cents, I don't think it's a bad idea to have extra language that clarifies things, even if potentially it's covered by the First Amendment or arguably by another section.
That's fine.
My 2
All right,
cents.
so thank you, folks. So relatedly, what I was really going to say is about that line sanctioned by the state or the town. So what about, I mean, there are, I think, block parties where they don't get a permit because they have a little park that they use, and they don't need to close the street. There are like things that are not necessarily like I'm not sure, is that the dividing line, sanctioned block parties? What if a block party, they did, it's impromptu and it's a few neighbors? I mean, is that the line we're drawing, that you have to have
They
a
would have
permit
to
for a
get a
block party?
variance. If they're worried about having complaints and they haven't pulled a permit to have the event, then they should go through the variance procedure.
Okay.
I will say with a block party, you're inviting everybody, so who's going to call? But
Yeah, it's true. Except for maybe the one curmudgeon or okay, good. All right. Anything else in this area here? I'll move along.
So A was in response to the concerns that we didn't give enough leeway on the weekends for people to do that sort of yard work. So we increased the time frame to mirror what we did for the weekdays. So it's you're able to do construction, blasting, demolition, power tools, home maintenance tools, landscaping, and yard maintenance equipment from the hours of, and I'm kind of like doing the opposite of what's written, from the hours of 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So there's an exclusion built into this. You're specifically prohibited from doing it from the hours of 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then I changed the weekends to be similar so that you can engage in these activities from 8 a.m. From 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but you can't engage in those activities from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. on the weekends.
What are the carve outs for that, Jill?
What do you mean the carve outs?
Well, what if I'm a nurse, I need to get to the hospital and I need to turn my snowblower on at 4 o'clock in the morning?
The snow blowers are different. There are exclusions for that in the previous section.
Can you just go back up to that for a second, Josh?
was this all in the previous thing that we already looked at, Jill?
Yeah, but we're just going over Jill's changes, Drew. Others of us have other changes.
See it, Pam? You good?
Okay, so the exceptions, noise created by snow removal equipment. So that's homeowner stuff too. That's somebody else coming down the road. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a full exclusion.
Okay, good. Okay. So if it's, later out in the summer I have to get all my mowing done now by 8 p.m. instead of 6 p.m.
Right.
Even though it might be light out till 9.
We gave more time, but I think 9 is pushing it a little bit. I mean, we did get several people writing into us just recently over the past month and a half, asking us to shorten this time frame.
Okay, so 8 to 8 was your compromise.
Yeah.
Okay, and the blasting I had read in your memo had to do with something that you were following there, I believe.
Right.
There was
With
a
the
rationale for
blasting,
that.
we had lumped it in with everything else when the hours were a little bit more narrow. But when we broadened it out a little bit, I noticed that in the state regulations, blasting had a much more narrow window of time allotted for it, and almost all of the ordinances I read mirrored that. So I thought we should maybe pull it out and have its own separate section.
Okay, and then where does the refuse removal come into play? What section is that?
Was in the previous, it's in the exclusions because the garbage has a new exclusion that I added since we added daytime hours.
Okay, where's that? Is that the new L?
It's 78.7, yes, L.
Okay, so you added that now. Noise created by refuse and solid waste collection provided activity is conducted during daytime hours.
Yes, because the noise regulations have always applied to garbage collection for nighttime hours.
Okay,
It's not a
and so
change.
and just remind me again, if we revert to the state standard for daytime hours, what time is that? That's 7 a.m.?
It's 7 a.m., yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So is
I
that
have a
what
cold
we're
too,
reverting-
so I apologize
Is that
for
what
my
we're
voice.
reverting to, is 7 a.m.?
Our ordinance currently is 7 a.m. too. Yeah.
Do you think you'll make the recommendation to go to the state recommendation, Jill, or are you going to stick with making it a stricter standard?
Oh, I'll change that time back because that was not a sticking point for me. You mean the
Okay.
9 p.m. and 10 p.m.?
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
I mean,
And then
I
this is
still,
again the fireworks. Oh, sorry, Jeff.
on A, I mean, I'm not in favor of limiting it to 8 o'clock at night on weekends. I mean, frankly, or even on weekdays, but at the very least weekends, just because it is still light in the summer hours, and certainly on weekdays people get home from the city at 7, 8 o'clock, and then they just can't do anything. So I think my personal view is I think 8 o'clock's limiting. Certainly on the weekends.
Do
I would say, I mean, what I personally would do, and I don't commute into New York anymore, but just having done it, I know what you want to get done when you get home. So I would say 9 p.m. on weekdays, and frankly 9 p.m. on weekends. But that's my view. I just think this is just further limiting what you can and cannot do in life. And I don't think it's disrespectful to go to 9 o'clock. It's almost, people just expect it. People don't blink an eye about it. Now, maybe at the beach in the densely populated areas of town, it is. But this will have to do with a comment I'll make later about the beach versus the rest of the town. But since we're looking at sort of a blanket ordinance here, I think 8 o'clock is too restricting.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking
like
about children.
I'd
I
like
think-
to say something about families, not the beach area. When I commuted, I had young families, I had young kids. There's absolutely no way that I would put my kids to sleep and go out and mow the lawn. So I think if you are respecting the entire community and you're also respecting your own family, you'll maybe just mow your lawn one time less. Mow it on the weekends. I don't know. Mow it when you're working out from home. But if you put your kids down, you are not going to be out mowing the lawn at 9 p.m. And you have to respect your neighbors.
That's
because
just
you have
your
no idea
opinion,
when
your
you're putting your
lifestyle, but
kids
that's
are
not
putting
an
their kids
overall.
down.
That's not an overall thing that everybody does. That's your
You're talking
opinion.
about people commuting, Jeff, people who.
I
commute.
am, okay, I am,
Yes,
but you know,
yes, and I'm
I had
talking
a
about when
family of
I
3 kids too.
commuted.
I cut my lawn between 8 and 9 because that's when I could do it. So we just have to look at the broader scope of everybody here. Yes, but of
I
course
agree
there's
with that, the
kids.
broader scope of everybody, yes.
Well,
So
but
maybe
they also,
maybe 8:30 would be a nice compromise number, Jill,
We've
to
already
think
pushed
about.
it back, Pam, and we've been working on this for a year. We pushed it back 2
So?
hours.
All
The
right.
point
Okay.
for me
Let's.
has
no,
been
let's
we're
like
going over it to
balancing,
review it right now.
and these issues, these types of noises have been these are complained about a lot, and it's something that people have asked us to address, and we thought that this was actually like a baby step to addressing them, and we are trying to compromise, and we did by increasing the hours by 2 hours from what we had originally proposed. And I think that we had changed it even more after some police input originally too. So I think that this is a good compromise and balance on people feeling like their rights are being infringed on with excessive noise from these things.
I'd
I
just
think
like to
it
say
gives a
one
good
last
window of
thing.
time.
I want to say this is about noise. This is not about mowing your lawn. And if you buy an electric lawnmower, you are not generating noise, and you could mow your lawn at midnight if you want. This is about noise. This is not about mowing your lawn.
Well, we're talking about things that make noise, and I would think maybe even a further compromise is, I agree, construction equipment to 9 o'clock, of course not. Power tools, no. I'm just simply talking about doing yard maintenance, those things that can sometimes only be taken care of at that hour. I would never expect a power saw to be put on at 8:30 at night or 8:45. That's a little, egregious. But I'm talking just yard maintenance. Really, yeah, cutting your lawn and doing some
Buy an
yard
electric
work.
lawnmower.
And I'm only referring to those few months in the summer where it is light till 9 o'clock. I'm not talking year round. So that's my opinion, and that's the only thing I would say on that.
My
and,
next
and
door
maybe another
neighbor,
differentiation is whether it's a homeowner or a professional, because in my opinion, a homeowner
Okay.
out at 8 o'clock at night mowing their own lawn is very different than 8 guys with blowers and the whole thing at 8 o'clock at night is pretty loud.
I was
Fair
just going to
point.
say that. Yeah.
My
So-
neighbor mowed his lawn at 5:30 in the morning, okay, because he couldn't sleep. When he did, he bought an electric lawnmower so his neighbors wouldn't be pissed off.
True, not everyone's going to buy an electric lawnmower,
So,
but point taken.
I mean, is there a way to carve out the do-it-yourselfer and give the do-it-yourselfer a little bit more leeway than
I don't
You know.
support that.
During summer hours.
I'm
during
just
summer
not
hours?
sure if I want to I understand why people would like to differentiate between the landscaping companies and the individual residential owners, but it makes me a little uncomfortable doing that and crafting rules for different people.
It's still noise.
I would consider, carving out maybe something seasonally for yard maintenance. So I could work on that.
That's really all I'm referring to. I'm not working on my yard in the winter, or people aren't working on their yard in the winter. Also, there's acreage up in the northern part of town that is 1 or 2 acres where noise isn't as big a deal. Doing your lawn at night isn't as big a deal. Is that the whole town? No, but it's a part of the town.
Then nobody
So-
will call, Jeff. Nobody will call.
Okay, have we covered this item enough yet? I think we have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We also, so where are we at? Are we on blasting or are we on I think we're on fireworks, right?
Yeah, it's just another, it's a restatement of what was said in the exclusions, basically.
Can we go back to blasting? It could be that you explained this and I missed it, but do you really mean that it shall not be conducted between 8 a.m. and 5? Wouldn't it only be allowed to be conducted during that time with
Oh,
permits?
Gosh, yes. Yes. It shall not be conducted between 5 p.m. and 8 a.m. I have it
Yeah.
flipped. Thank you, Karen.
Sure.
And then for variances, I just used stock language, and this is really just to give people an opportunity to have some flexibility. If they have a party that they're nervous about triggering some kind of noise complaint, they can apply for a variance.
Jill, do
Okay,
they not
I
now
think
need to apply for a variance?
We don't have a variance procedure. Deep regulations do afford an opportunity to apply for variances, but we never had that in our ordinance before. And I think it's because we didn't have daytime hours delineated, so we didn't think it would be an issue.
What's a scenario where somebody would apply for a variance?
I think like someone who's having maybe a nighttime birthday party where they want to have a band play or they want outdoor music and they're not sure whether they're going to be able to stay within the decibel readings, but it's a one-off, not something they have every day. And it's a special event and they just want to get permission to do it.
And what about a burr event? Could a burr event get a variance?
I didn't intend for burr events to be able to get variances. I don't know if someone could potentially do that, or if like Park and Rec could apply for variances for people.
Anything else on this section? All right, so we've gone through the changes since our last meeting. Does anyone else want to highlight anything or propose anything or discuss anything? I'm happy to scroll through for people. I think I heard somebody might have stuff.
Could you just go down slowly by page if you don't mind, Josh?
Okay, so we're just going to open the floor, right? And I'm going to scroll through and if people want to talk about things as we go, right?
Just want to look at the daytime hours once again so I can process this. 7 a.m. 9 p.m.
I'm going to change that 9 p.m. to 10 back to 10 p.m.
Right.
So just for clarification, during Monday through Thursday, the hours are 7 a.m. to 9 p.m.?
Yes.
Or is it Sunday through Thursday?
No, it's because of the way that the nighttime hours are written with the weekends and weekday.
Okay, so 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's the state standard.
Yeah.
And then Friday through Sunday moves to 8 to 10 p.m. And your carve out currently for something like a lawnmower would be allow it to go to 8 p.m.
Right.
And that's up from your original 6.
Yes.
I think Jeff had a good point. Jill, if you would go back and look at maybe a residential carve out that if you can make that work, that would be nice.
I think especially if we've defined
Or a
daytime
seasonal,
hours.
it's a seasonal thing that you mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, we mentioned daytime hours here as 7 to 9 p.m. Wouldn't there be a carve out for what I had mentioned until 9 p.m. daytime hours in the seasonal months of lawn mowing season?
Anything else here?
I'm not willing to commit to that right now, but I will definitely work on it and try to bring something to the floor. but I would want to talk to everyone about that and really be specific. I'd have to be specific with the language.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. I'm good on that page.
Anybody else have anything here?
Can you just go over that? Explain to me the police department discretion. Are they losing any discretion because of the changes that you made?
No, it just increases the ways that they can enforce this ordinance by adding this plainly audible standard. They don't have to use it, but they can, and it will enable them to enforce it without using a sound level meter, which seems like something that that would help.
And what's their whole position on this now that it's been reworked?
I submitted the changes to Chief Calamares and Captain Wyatt, and no recommended changes were submitted back to me, and they said that they are not supportive and not against. They're completely neutral about the changes.
Okay. So their position is they're still comfortable working under what the state statute was.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because doesn't under the state statute, they essentially have, discretion to determine what's reasonable noise and what's not. They use the meter.
It's not a noise thing that they're using. It's a breach of peace, which is pretty onerous, and so they don't apply it very much. It's not just a minor infraction. So like if you look at what's at fines issued or any kinds of real actions taken, like 1% of complaints end up with an action taken against the person. So and there's a reason for that, because breach of peace is pretty, or disorderly conduct is pretty serious. It goes on your record.
Sure.
Is the intent of this ordinance to actually give more infractions?
The intent is to actually enforce this ordinance. That's one of the big ones. And the intent is to be compliant with state law and to give the tool, to give more tools to the police to actually enforce this, and to incorporate some things that we've heard as complaints over the past few years, to just be responsive.
So
when you when you say to get the police to enforce that, define that for me. What does that mean?
The ordinance isn't being enforced currently. I mean, it's as if we have something on the books that's meaningless. And it gives people the false impression that we have regulations that can help protect them from excessive noise, but there really aren't. Not in the way that it's not functionally, not practically. So I would really like to fix that.
So I'm failing to understand drawing the delineation between how we're not changing their discretion because they have the discretion, and how is this document now making this? How will this compel them to enforce?
I mean,
what am I not understanding?
I can't compel the police to enforce this ordinance. I hope that they do when they're given this new tool that enables them to enforce it without having a sound level meter, because that seems to have been a big stumbling block. We only have one as a town. It seems like it's maybe a clunky instrument, although other towns are able to use it pretty effectively. You could see in our backup that there's a back and forth emails with another chief of police who it's pretty straightforward to use noise meters. But because in Fairfield it has been an issue with using noise meters, we added this plainly audible so that the police have the discretion to determine whether there's a violation just based on their hearing the noise and determining whether it's excessive.
So you're saying that prior to this, they're using plainly audible, but then would have to use breach of peace.
Before adding this language, they weren't enforcing this ordinance. They were just using a breach of the state statute, breach of peace and public disturbance.
Okay, and they are not endorsing this. They're not condemning it, but they still stand by their statement that they were fine with the state statute.
Right.
Okay, I'm fine. Okay, thank you.
Anything else in this area? Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I have a question. Yeah, I know at least in the original memorandum, it said, one of the 3 goals was to, actually the first goal was to give the police department more tools to use to assist in enforcement. Simply standards apply. But they really have the same tools they had because they're using discretion. And
Well, but the discretion they were using was only for a state statute that is completely different than a noise ordinance.
well, they were also using discretion when neighbors would call. I mean, I know myself, I've been, in the early days of having a band, I would play and police would come on several occasions because neighbors would call and we'd stopped. So I know for a fact they've used discretion to stop things. Not only discretion, but also calls from neighbors. And it seems to me those are pretty good tools. And then they've come out to say, not necessarily in support or against, but they've also come out publicly to say this ordinance doesn't do anything to help us do our job any better. I'm paraphrasing.
I didn't read the response that way.
Well, that's the way I read it, but I like however you read it or I read it is aside from anything. I mean, it'd be really helpful to hear from the police. It just would be. I mean, we could all call them separately and get their opinion. I've tried. I haven't heard back. I'd like to hear what they have to say about this, because to me, we're trying to enforce something, and as Pam used the word, compel them to enforce. Like, I guess my big issue on all this, and this is speaking somewhat generally, obviously, is we have an issue down at the beach. I don't disagree with that. But I think we're taking the time now to not only address that issue, which is good that we are, but now we're saying, hey, let's think about the whole town and all the different noise problems. And
it's not though. From the data, it doesn't even pan out that way. The data
I don't see there being noise problems all throughout town is one of our top issues.
Beach area complaints are 30% of the complaints.
So let's deal with.
I live in the beach area, Jeff. Please don't make generalizations. The letters I've been getting are from neighbor to neighbor. They do not all include the university students. So please don't make generalizations about the
then let's
beach.
I'm not. I never said.
Not even
One at a time, people.
I
One at a
said
time.
the beach area. I said the beach area. That's all I said. And that's why I'd like to hear from the police. Okay. Officers, why is this?
That already.
No, Drew, you keep interrupting me. You keep interrupting me.
No point of order, Jeff, because Jill has been
Drew,
working
stop
on this
interrupting
for 12
me because
months,
I have the floor
and
right
she
now.
met with the police.
All
right, guys.
Over and over, and you did not participate.
Drew,
you did not do it.
I have the
No,
floor.
you said that.
Drew.
You don't have to repeat yourself.
You have never repeated yourself, and I'm not repeating myself. I have the
All right,
floor.
guys. Drew, let Jeff. Jeff does have the floor. Jeff, go ahead.
I didn't say anything about students. I said the beach area. Okay, and first of all, this is my opinion, Drew. This is my opinion on this ordinance.
I listened to your opinion, Jeff.
Second of all,
I listened to your opinion.
Why don't we hear from the police to find out why there's an issue enforcing before we legislate? That's all. It's like we're trying to legislate and say all the things we can't do, versus addressing the very specific problem of the beach area where most of this is coming from. And I would just like to hear from the police. What is the issue? Why are we not enforcing it? Are there reasons? And then instead, we're just going to legislate. That's all. Jill, your intentions are good. Not questioning your intentions. It's just the further legislation and restricting and trying to apply this all over town for what is primarily a beach area or southern part of Fairfield problem. That's all. So
It's
I'm not going
clearly
to
a
repeat myself. That's all I have
broken-
to say.
It's clearly a broken ordinance, though, if it's not being enforced. It needs to be addressed. We've also identified that we're not in compliance with state statute. That also needs to be addressed. There are a lot of issues that clearly absolutely need to be addressed, and we have been working with the police. We met with them. I don't know how many meetings we had with them, and we brought all of these issues. I have been trying to kind of pussyfoot around the issue of lack of enforcement because it's embarrassing to the police department. We shouldn't have to say that we need to compel the police to enforce language that is on our books. But I've been trying to put it in really diplomatic words that, this is a new way that other towns have been successful in enforcing their ordinance. And it's something that I would really like to enable our police department to do because they have voiced an issue about the sound level meters. They have definitely said sound level meters are not something they want to carry around and they're not something that they're using. So that's a problem for our ordinance, and it's a problem for the state regulations, to be frank, because the state regulations are completely dependent on decibel readings. So I'm totally on board with having the police come before us when we
Great.
vote on this.
Yeah. That'd be great.
Can I just,
Anybody else have anything on this section, or do people want to scroll through, or are the comments people want to make more general
Can I
and not about specific?
I guess I just want to respond to something that Jeff said that was said repeatedly at the meeting in the face of different facts. It is not a beach issue. Only 30% of the complaints come from the beach. 70% come from all over town. So to keep saying that misleads people, and it really changes the discussion when in fact it's a town-wide issue. So I just want to make sure we talk about actual facts.
I just want to touch on that point. That's a statistic that is coming from one tiny data point. So I personally don't even think we should be using it. It's fine if you don't want to say it's not coming from a specific area, but I'm sorry, I am not going to use one tiny data point from 1 year on what that percentage is. There's not a statistician out there that would ever use that as research and data.
Okay.
So you cannot extrapolate that from there. If somebody wants to go back and do a 5-year study and then present a number to me, that could be valid. That number, respectfully, is a little pinpoint somebody put on a map at a snapshot in a tiny period of time.
Okay, but I guess I would say that's the only statistic we have. So at least at a minimum, please don't make the case that this is a beach issue because it's not.
I will
Okay.
say for certain from what I have seen personally come through my email box,
But
the
that's
majority of the
anecdotal, Pam.
people
It's-
commenting on this thing are from one specific area of town and one specific street. From what I have seen and
That's-
through my inbox, that's all
Okay,
I'm going to
that's
say
not
on
what
that.
I've seen. But all I ask is that you stop with the narrative that this is a beach issue only because people in town are picking that up and it's just false. So let's just put that off the table and have an honest discussion.
So regardless of where these complaints are coming from or not coming from, I think we all agree that this ordinance needs to cover the whole, needs to work for the whole town. It needs to be something the whole town that it works for the way the whole town works, and all different neighborhoods are different. We have lots of different neighborhoods. So I think we probably do all agree on that, and how we get there is probably less important in my mind. Is there anything else? Do people want me to keep scrolling here, or do you want to just have more of a general conversation? I'm
I'd like
happy
to
to
call
stop
for a
sh-
vote.
sharing.
Can we vote? It's 9:36.
Well, I want to make sure everyone has had a chance to say whatever they might want to say.
Yeah, if you could just keep going down, just
Yeah.
real quick, if you don't mind, Josh. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. So I was wondering about vehicle muffler. how that fits as a device whose primary function is the production of sound? I guess it's one of those mufflers that is like tuned to make a lot of noise. Is that the idea?
Yes.
Okay.
Jill,
Yes.
Ed Bateson, when we look at that, I know currently now under the current ordinance, there's essentially no restriction on daytime noise. Is that correct?
Yes, we don't have daytime hours delineated.
Okay, I appreciate the plainly audible when it gets dark. I'm not sold on plainly audible during daytime hours. I just I don't know. I think that's a little too subjective and restrictive. That's just me. I've been thinking about this for weeks. I get the intent. I appreciate plainly audible at night, or I should say nighttime hours, but during the summertime, I just, you know what? I don't support it. I just don't. I don't want to say we should be lawless, but you know, that's going to be. You wonder why the police department wouldn't enforce something. I mean, how do you enforce that? Kids washing their cars with the stereo on, somebody listening to a baseball game. I mean, come on. In densely populated areas, it's going to be problematic.
For the plainly audible.
Plainly audible during the day. I get it at night. I mean, I do. When the sun goes down, I don't want to hear my neighbor's music. But during the summertime, it is what it is. I hate to say it, but that's just my attitude. Now, maybe I'm just cut from a different cloth, but that's what it is. I mean, I grew up in the beach area. It is what it is. I mean, I'm not saying,
Yeah, I think that we've been functioning in the false framework that there are absolutely no protections during the daytime, though, when there should have been.
I say
since
that, okay,
for a really long
philosophically,
time.
we disagree. I don't think there should be.
But there are. I mean, there are that's been designated by the state. We people who live in Connecticut are protected from excessive noise during the daytime. That's been determined by the state.
Okay.
And we just haven't
all
been
right. I'm
functioning
I'm
under
off.
that.
I don't like plainly audible during the day.
I'm gonna keep scrolling. Stop me if you want. Anything else anyone wants to ask, say, comment on, or are we ready to vote?
No,
Go ahead,
I
Karen.
just have a. So this obviously generated a lot of discussion. It's been one of our biggest changes, this session. It was a big change when we did it, I don't know, however many years ago, made the little tweaks to what we tweaked then. Has there been given any thought by the sponsors to hold a public hearing on this, to hear from people? How are you getting your public input? What type of outreach are you looking to do? Have you asked the first selectwoman to get this into our newsletter so people are aware, especially now with the revisions? How are we
Put
getting it
into
out?
her newsletter, I think already. We're having the regular set of hearings, which is pretty liberal, where we have to have this on the agenda for 2 full months, and it gives a lot of opportunity for public comment and discussion in both our committee and RTM meetings.
Okay. And just from a process standpoint then, so the recommendation is to stay with our standard procedure. It'll sit on 2 agendas. People should give comment when appropriate, send in feedback and stuff. So now this will be on the May agenda and then with a vote in June. Is that how that?
Yeah, I
Right?
hope
Because then
so.
it'll sit on May. It'll be on May, sit on May, and then it'll sit on June and then vote in June. Does that sound right? Right, Josh? I'm like
Yes.
confusing myself. Yeah, okay.
Sounds right to me.
Okay. All right. So no additional town hall or anything like that.
I wasn't planning on doing that. I thought that the public comment built into our 4 RTM meetings over the next 2 months was sufficient.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't think we took a motion on this, so why don't we do the same thing we did on the last one? And if someone wants to move it, and if there's any planned amendments, or if it's more just a matter of you're going to go back to the committee and discuss some of these things, that's fine. But like, just outline what the plan is, and then make that a motion. Do you want to do that, Jill?
Well, I could move to make that amended time change for the weekday schedule right now, and we'll commit to doing that. So do you want me to make the motion to change?
Just do it all as one motion, or whatever.
Okay.
It's all good. Whatever you want to do.
I think if your intent is to include it, Jill, then we'll take you at your word on that. Excuse me.
Okay.
Josh,
So
I wasn't able to get an edited version, a red line version. You sent me that, but it went to the website and it was like it went in error. I'd love to get
I could send you a copy.
send me the latest like red line version.
Yeah, can I do that right after the meeting?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve this version, but with the changes to the nighttime hours for the weekday schedule back to 10 p.m.
And also the change to the blasting section. Yeah.
And you're also, I think, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, were you going to consider and take back to your committee the idea of a possible seasonal lawn mowing exclusion or something?
Yes,
that-
I'm
Support
gonna
that.
consider that and see if we can craft something like that.
Okay.
But these are the changes that I will put into the red line like immediately, the nighttime hours and the blasting.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Drew.
Karen. Okay. Do we have public who wants to comment? I see some people, I'm not sure who they are. Is there public who wants to comment? Going once? Going twice? Okay. All right, let's take a vote. All those in favor as Jill described.
Drew. Drew. Josh. Jill. Karen.
All those opposed?
And Jeff. Who is no? I see Jeff's hand.
Ed and Jeff are opposed, and I think we might have an abstentions. Pam is an abstention. And that, my friends, is that. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Josh.
Yep. Can I have
Thank
a
you,
motion to
Josh.
adjourn? Have a good night, everyone. Sleep well.
You
Thank
too.
you, everybody.
Bye-bye.